Hi, and welcome to week 3 of Web Devign, Ingenious Ways to Work Smarter, Faster, and Healthier. I'm Bebo, and I'm here with Ron. And today, we'll hear about Strager's time sink into debugging JavaScript and how you can avoid the same fate. After that lightning talk, Devin will dive into Impostor Syndrome and how you can overcome self-doubts that impact your development experience so that you can work smarter, faster, and be healthier. So let's get started today with some quick housekeeping items. If you haven't already, join us on discord.gg/web. Open up that Discord client and join us in the live discussion channel. I got Diana over here screaming my name already, so it's wonderful to hear. The URL is below on the screen. And today we'll be choosing a random participant of that channel to receive Discord Nitro and several participants to receive Reddit Premium at the end of the talk. So be sure to stay active throughout. In the live discussion channel, you'll obviously have the opportunity to discuss the talks with other listeners, such as Diana and Titan, among just a few. Do that, but we'll also be monitoring the channel to collect questions. And at the end of each talk, we'll have a brief Q&A session round with the speaker. And finally, did you know that we have more awesome speakers lined up on December 13th, December 20th, and December 27th. Visit redditweb.dev/schedule to learn more and add those talks to your calendar. Now, I'll ask Ron to introduce our first speaker for today. Ron?
Thank you, Bebo. I can't believe we are on our session 3. Now, a lot of us grew up using JavaScript by debugging with window.alerts. Every time you wanted to see what you output, you just showed up a pop-up box. Some of us graduated onto console.log. Some of us moved on to breakpoints. Some of us never moved beyond writing things down on a piece of paper. I know I still do that. Our first speaker, who's going to be giving a lightning talk, is a former Facebook engineer and also a self-described human Stack Overflow. Over the next 15 minutes, he's going to show you how you can make JavaScript debugging less painful. Welcome on board, Strager.
Hello, everyone.
I want to ask you a question, but given you're a human Stack Overflow, I'm already going to mark my question as duplicate.
Sure.
You've been practicing that joke all week long, haven't you?
Oh, absolutely. Like through the mirror, like back there. Yeah, just talking 100 times. So, I mean, your thing is, I don't want to spoil too much. I know it's going to be about VS Code extensions, but for people who have, greased the groove, they've got the workflow, they know console.log and maybe console.dir or table or whatever. Why should they go exploring, other workflows?
For what I'm going to talk about, it's going to show you as soon as you type. You don't have to run your program. You don't have to add any extra things. You don't have to click buttons to insert breakpoints or anything. All of the feedback that these extensions give you will be instant. And you don't have to activate it. So it's just there. You just have to look at it. So, it sounds like most experienced developers will be familiar with some of these tools, but I'm giving more exposure to maybe extensions you didn't know about and maybe features of these tools that you didn't know about.
Sounds excellent. I think I've seen your outline. There are things I certainly didn't know about. So I think all of you watching, you're going to learn a few things over the next 15 minutes. Strager, we'll let you take the stage. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. All right. Hello, everyone. Here we have a JavaScript program. I want you to look through the program and find mistakes. Today, we're going to discuss 4 different Visual Studio Code extensions that will help you find mistakes much more quickly than manually scanning the code. So when I look at this code, the first thing I notice is that the font is very boring. So first, let's fix the font. There we go. Now we have a much more comical font, easier to read, especially for dyslexic people. So the first extension we're going to talk about is the Typescript extension. Now the Typescript extension comes with Visual Studio Code, and it can check JavaScript code, not just TypeScript code. So when you install Visual Studio Code, the extension is enabled by default. I turned it off so you didn't cheat and catch the mistakes. So let's turn on the extension, which is enabled by default. So we go to JavaScript validate in the settings, turn that back on. And here we see that some things have changed. We have this red squiggly here and this grayed out, and we got some dots. So the first issue up here is that we are missing a right parenthesis. So let's add that right parenthesis. This note over here says unreachable code detected. Now, this isn't obvious, especially to beginner programmers or people just starting JavaScript. When you have a return statement and you have a new line, the new line will end the return statement as if you had a semicolon there. So this program behaves the same regardless of whether you have the semicolon. So what's actually happening is that we're returning nothing, and then we're skipping past this code because it's not running. That's why the Typescript extension says unreachable code detected. So if we fix that mistake, put it all in one line, we no longer have unreachable code. And then down here we have 3 dots. The 3 dots indicates we could not find occupation. Did you mean occupation? So we typoed the variable name. Let's do a quick fix, change the spelling, and now our code is good to go. So that's the built-in TypeScript extension. It checks JavaScript code. You can see this is just .js. I didn't have any configuration to turn on the TypeScript checker. It works out of the box. That's your out-of-the-box experience with Visual Studio Code. So let's turn that back off so we can demonstrate other checkers. The next checker we're going to look at is Dino. So let's install the Dino extension. Okay, and we get an error as soon as we install it. It says couldn't start client Dino language server. That's because Dino has 2 parts. It has the Visual Studio Code extension, which we just installed, but it also has Dino. Now the Dino command line utility needs to be installed separately, so let's go do that. In order to do that, we have to go to the Dino website at dino.land. We click the install button. There's different install options. Let's follow this option here. And let's open a terminal and do the install. Okay, now we have Dino installed. We still don't get any feedback. We need to restart VS Code in order to have the Dino extension really enable. And we still don't get any feedback. That's because we need to enable the Dino extension. You can do it on a per project basis, or you can do it globally for VS Code. Let's do it for VS Code. So let's search Dino enable and check that box. Dino has extra checks we can enable, so let's turn those on. It's called Dino Lint. And here now we have some changes. We have the same right paren thing as we got before. And as soon as we type that, we get some more squigglies. I love squigglies. So here we have an unnecessary semicolon. I have an unnecessary semicolon. So let's fix that. Well, it doesn't have an option to remove the semicolon, only to disable the warning. I don't want to disable the warning, so let's fix it manually. Here, empty code block. Okay, I guess we don't want that empty else. And here we have the unreachable code issue again, so let's fix that. And of course, occupation's misspelled. So you notice that the Dino extension has all of the checks that the TypeScript extension has, which is built in, plus some extra things, like finding the extra semicolon and finding the empty else. So that is the Dino extension. Let's move on to the QuickLint JS extension, and let's first disable Dino. Let's disable the extension. Reload. Okay, now we're at a blank slate. Let's install QuickLint JS. Install. All right. Now we don't have any extra setup we got to do. We just install the extension and we get some squigglies. Now these squigglies are different than the other 2 extensions. Here on Fancy it says if statement is missing a right paren. Okay, let's add that. Whoops. We have assignment to const variable. Okay. Well, it looks like our occupation variable is const. We can't reassign a const variable. So let's declare it with let and get rid of that issue. Here on return, it says return statement returns nothing undefined. So we need to, unlike the other checkers, which detected unreachable code, this one tells us at return. So it's in a different spot. The error indication is at a different spot. That's common with linters. They find different issues or report them in different ways. And here we have use of undeclared variable occupation. We have to fix this ourselves. So that is the QuickLint.js extension. Now let's move on to the most popular code checker for JavaScript code, which is Eslint. So let's disable QuickLint. Let's install the Eslint extension. Okay. So we don't get any feedback, and that is because, similar to Dino, we need to install Eslint. So let's go ahead and install Eslint, which using npm. So save dev says we want to save it in our project as a developer tool. npm install save dev Eslint. So now Eslint is installed. However, we still don't get feedback. That's because we also need to configure Eslint. There's a wizard tool we can use, so let's use that. Eslint init. And it asks us a bunch of questions, and we can use it to customize our configuration. So let's find errors. Let's modules. Sure, we're not using React. We're not using TypeScript. Browser. Sure. So now after we finish the wizard, we get a squiggly here. It says unexpected token left curly. We know that's because we're missing a right paren. And after we fix that issue, we get a bunch of other issues. Here we have unnecessary semicolon. Let's quick fix that. Cool. Here we have occupation is a constant. That's because this is const. We need to make that let. We still have a squiggly here. It says occupation is assigned a value but never used. Well, that is because here we have a typo in the variable name. If we fix the typo here, now we're using that variable, and now it doesn't complain. Here we have an empty block statement. Quick fix. It looks like we can't disable the issue. Well, we can't fix the issue, but we can disable it. Let's not disable it. Let's fix it manually. And here, unreachable code. We got to put that on one line. So that is Eslint's default settings. Now, Eslint has a big ecosystem of plugins. So many of these plugins add extra checks, and there's different categories of checks and different opinions on what the checks should be. You can add your own checks, of course. Let's look at some extension. Let's look at a plugin that will help us code in style. So the plugin we're going to look at is the Airbnb Preset. So in order to install the Airbnb Preset, we need to go to our Eslint configuration, which is in Eslint RC. And in the extends line, we need to change this to Airbnb base. Now, if we do that, it doesn't find any more issues because we need to install the Airbnb preset as well with npm. So let's do that. npm install save dev eslint config Airbnb base. And as soon as we install it, we get more squigglies. So here we have missing semicolon. Okay, let's fix that. Here we have strings must use single quote. So this is the opinion of the authors of this plugin that you should use single quote. So sure, let's adhere to that style. Here we have unexpected string concatenation. I don't know what's wrong with string concatenation. It seems legal to me, but let's do a fix. Okay, it seems like it likes using template literals instead of string concatenation. Fine. And we have these red squigglies here. It looks like extra spaces, so let's fix those. We have a bunch of issues down here. Expected indentation of 0. This looks like a white space issue. Fix that. Console.log, unexpected console statement. This is just documentation, but here's the checker saying unexpected console statement. I think that's because it doesn't like us putting console log in production. It's just a demo, so let's fix it by disabling the checker. And then here we also have missing semicolon. So that is the different extensions. We covered the Typescript extension, the Dino extension, the Quicklint JS extension, and Eslint extension, and Eslint with some plugins. All right, that is all I've had. Bah.
Thank you for that. What we liked is that it feels like, as I said, it feels like hot module reloading for bugs. The fact that we're not just hitting run or hitting build every time just to find out. I love that we're seeing them straight as we type.
Yeah. Static analysis is really helpful for development. Yeah.
100%. I mean, I'm convinced. Bebo?
I am not a JS developer.
We'll have to get into PHP debugging, and the pain it caused, and one for every language. We do have some questions. Dima asks, on a scale from 1, unpacking archive in command line interface, to 10, which is installing Arc, what is the difficulty of installing Quicklint JS to a school computer by young school students? Can they do it without requesting teachers' assistance?
I do not know. If they're able to install Visual Studio Code, I see no reason they wouldn't be able to install the extension. The extension is just a few files that you install on your machine. I think you can install it as a user rather than on the entire machine. So if you can add files in your project, I imagine you should be able to add extensions, install extensions. So it should be pretty easy. And I think that applies to all the extensions we covered, not just Quicklint JS.
Makes sense.
I have a question for you as well. Where did you get your shirt?
Oh, my girlfriend designed and printed it.
No way.
Yeah, it's a illustration of both of us.
And the next question is, where did you get your girlfriend?
I found her on OkCupid maybe 10 years ago.
Well, that worked out well.
Yeah.
Another question I have is, this little set of extensions and plugins you've come to, did that evolve over time? Or, the moment you started, obviously Eslint has been around for a long time, but say like Quicklint JS and using the Dino extension, were you using something else before?
I was using nothing for a while, and it got frustrating. I kept making typos, like typing JSON parse or JSON, like using the wrong functions and stuff, just forgetting and having to look it up. So I did some research into what's out there. Eslint didn't work out for me because I edit a lot of scripts. So I'm a Twitch streamer, and I often end up editing people's code and jumping into their projects or writing little one-off scripts in a temporary directory. And Eslint needs a non-trivial amount of setup work in order to get it working. I also looked at Flow. Flow had a similar thing where you needed some setup work. I got fed up and started writing Quicklint. So I'm the author of Quicklint JS. After I was working at Quicklint, eventually Dino came about. I mean, Dino was before Quicklint, but they didn't have all the tooling until a little bit after Quicklint started. But even still, the Dino stuff, I don't use Visual Studio Code myself. I use Vim, and Dino's Vim stuff isn't as up to par compared to the Visual Studio Code extension. So I personally use Quicklint JS with Vim, but I thought I would share other tools that I found in my research. And most people who do JavaScript, I imagine, use Visual Studio Code. And also, I think there needs to be more online material on how to set up these tools, especially Eslint, but also just get some exposure to Dino and Quicklint.
Well, that's very thoughtful. I think you're right that the lion's share of web devs use VS Code, or a lion's share at least.
Yeah.
I have another question that might end our time here, but it was from Rambo, if you were to start a JS project right now, which linter or JS checkers would you use?
I would use Quicklint and Eslint. Well, so if I was going to build something for Dino specifically, I would use the Dino tools. Maybe I would also use other tools, but I would start with Dino because I would be using it already. But if I'm doing something on the web, I would reach for Quicklint JS, and then as the project got more like beyond just one file or one script, I would switch to Eslint. Well, actually, I would use Eslint in combination with Quicklint.
Perfect. Well, once again, thank you for that talk, for showing us how to save a lot of time. And it definitely looked a lot less painful than some of the things I do to debug JavaScript, that's for sure. As we
Console.log?
Exactly, just 100 times down. Once again, we'll put this, if you want to follow more of Strager. He streams on Twitch very regularly, so that's twitch.tv/Strager. And if you manage to miss the start of this talk, we'll also be putting this up on YouTube as a recording as well. Once again, Strager, thank you for taking your time to show us how to debug JavaScript.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next up, we are going to speak about imposter syndrome. Now, a lot of us go through this. A lot of us see the wonderful work that other developers in the wide web world, big, massive world. A lot of developers in the scene. That's what I'm trying to say. And a lot of them are better than you. But the thing is, you're also a lot better than others in your particular work, in your particular journey. And where you measure yourself makes a big difference with how you perceive yourself. Our next speaker, who will be giving us our full-length talk this session, will be going across that. Please welcome on board, Devin Rowan.
Hi, how's it going?
Very, very good. I'm eager to hear about this one. What made you so resonant with the topic of imposter syndrome?
Well, it's something that I have struggled with previously. I've done freelance work in the past doing web development work and things like that. And just the general anxiety that imposter syndrome can bring really does actually affect your workflow. And it can really cause delays to the point where it's procrastination, not really because you can't do it, but because you think you can't do it. And at the same time, it really is affected by personal projects in the past. It's been really hard to finish some things just from the fact that I myself believed I couldn't really do it. But I think it's something that really does affect developers a lot. And for a while, I went years without really knowing this is something that I personally dealt with. So yeah, that's kind of why I chose to speak on this topic.
I think you nailed it on the head there, that a lot more people go through it than realize they're going through it, which is one of the reasons why we really liked the topic that you submitted for this talk.
Yeah. Well, thank you. I appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Thank you. Some of you might know that Devin Rowan is one of our more active members of our community, so we're also keen to let the community share to the community as well. All right, Devin.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Let's have our socks blown off and be reminded about our own imposter syndrome.
All right, we'll have to figure out how to share the screen here. One moment. I am new to this. I apologize. All right, I think we got it. Perfect. Alrighty. So we're at the beginning here. Sorry about that. So yeah, my name's Devin Rowan. I chose to talk on imposter syndrome today for my talk. Mine's going to be about 40 minutes. That's the goal, anyhow. I plan to have around 10 minutes or so for Q&A or kind of just kind of discussion afterwards, because this is kind of be a topic that is kind of, a bit of a nervous one, right? It does get kind of personal, and it's something that does kind of touch a lot of us personally in many ways. So I did put a little comic there from XKCD. It kind of summarizes imposter syndrome quite wonderfully, I think. But a little bit about me really quick. I'm from Wisconsin in the United States. I was born and I was raised here, and I've lived here all my life. So I've really come to enjoy the cold, not so much the snow. No, I don't really like the snow all that much, but I became interested in programming due to the Minecraft modding community, like at a young age. I was really interested in learning how to make modifications for the game. So that's kind of how I got into it, learning Java, and from there it just kind of took off. I do have a bird and a cat as pets, and it actually works out better than you would think. I'm actually in my office right now, like my office room, I call it. And I do have my bird. I'm using a noise filtering software so that we can't really hear him, because he is going to be talking quite a lot during this, as will I be. I have done freelance work in the past, like I've said, but at the moment, I'm really not doing much of that. Right now, I'm attending college, and I'm pursuing to get my AAS, or my Associate Applied Science, in web and software development. Okay. So I think this is a scenario that I touched on at the beginning here. Most of us are familiar with something I call like write, run, abandon, repeat. You kind of have a new project. And for a while, it goes okay. You think you got this. But you start to hit some roadblocks, and you decide to maybe take a break from it. But ultimately, you really don't come back to the project. It just gets really abandoned. And then you'll start a new project, and then it just repeats and it repeats. Now, when we really think of this as burnout sometimes, I believe really is imposter syndrome at work, because a lot of times when we're working on these projects, we'll be working on our own thing. We'll be looking at other examples of things other people have done, and we'll see that theirs looks amazing. Ours really hasn't gotten as far yet in that actual development process, and we just think that there's no way we could ever reach that point. So it's really just that actual anxiety there, I think, that we've all experienced in this sense. It is a bit of a frustrating experience, but something I think we could all relate to. So then really, what is imposter syndrome? Obviously, we do have that example set out there. But at its core, what really does that boil down to? Imposter syndrome can really be defined as an anxiety that's fueled by self-doubts around your education, your knowledge, accomplishments, or experience in your field, which kind of creates fears that you are a fraud. It is debilitating. It can make work performance suffer and personal projects even more frustrating to work on. It's as with the example that was just set out in the previous slide there. It can really have a great effect even just on your personal projects, to the point where, something you were very passionate on working on becomes just very difficult to continue working on. And it is a little bit sad at times, because, we spend all this time really getting excited about something, and it just becomes hard to continue with it. So it's not something that can be seen externally. It's something that's really only felt by the person who's dealing with it, right? So, you go to work, or you're working on your own projects, or, in the workplace, you might seem just fine. But really, you are going through something. You're dreading coming to work. At work, you are the day just dredges on, because you're just so caught up in all these worries. So while other people can't really see it, you are feeling it very much so. But luckily, it's something that can be beaten, which is really good. And we'll be able to talk about that today. So if we look at kind of the numbers here, we can see that mental health issues, and especially imposter syndrome, is something that does reach the development community in general quite a lot. So according to a 2018, mind you, survey conducted by Team Blind of tech workers, so roughly 58% of the 10,402 respondents reported experiencing imposter syndrome. So that is quite a big number. I mean, the majority of the respondents there did indicate experiencing imposter syndrome at some point. Which again, this is why this is a topic I chose, because it is wide-reaching, and this can be shown through surveys and the like. And then if we look at Stack Overflow's insights, Stack Overflow does a yearly survey of developers on the site. So the 2021 found that roughly 22% of respondents indicated a mental health issue, such as depression, anxiety, ADHD, or some form of autism spectrum disorder. So again, while not quite the majority, it is quite a big number still. You got to bear in mind, millions of developers make use of Stack Overflow, and millions probably take that survey as well. I forgot the exact number there. Mental health is also tied directly to imposter syndrome. I mean, imposter syndrome can have a recursive or kind of circular effect on mental health, where you deal with imposter syndrome, it worsens your mental health, which worsens the imposter syndrome, which worsens your mental health. It just goes in a circle, and it kind of spirals downward. And it can become an issue where you're bringing home your issues at work, which is affecting your mental health, which then is causing more issues at work, which is causing more issues at home with your mental health. It's an issue. It was definitely sobering to see just how much this affects people in the tech community. So some common ways of thinking with imposter syndrome. One that's really common is I'm overpaid, which sounds strange, right? Usually it's the opposite, where we think, man, I'm not getting paid enough. This is very common, where people think their work is just way too simple to the point where they're getting paid way too much to do it. And it makes them think that that's maybe an indication of that their quality of work is not matching what they get paid, which typically isn't the case. Typically you just get paid quite a bit for some jobs, and there's just some workloads that just aren't going to be probably what matches what you get paid. Another one is that I'm less skilled than my coworkers. Obviously, with any workplace, you are going to see varying level of skills, right? Not everyone's going to be at the same level. Some are going to be less skilled than others. I mean, we have junior and senior developers and also designers, things like that. But it is something that gets you worried, is that the coworkers will discover the lack of skills you have, supposedly, and you'll be realized as a fraud. Which, again, sounds a little weird on the outside, but to someone dealing with this, it sounds perfectly reasonable. It sounds like, there'll be repercussions for any supposed lack of skills you have, when really that's most likely not going to be the case. So just simply, my work is not good. My work is not that high of quality. I mean, that's a very common one that most of us can probably, have had at one point. Just dissatisfaction with your quality of work in both personal projects and professionally. My work is not important. Feeling that your work doesn't have much value, or the things you produce aren't adding value to the project, the company, anything like that. That is a very common way of thinking with imposter syndrome as well. And really, ultimately, I can't keep up with this workload. I mean, that's a really common one too, is the fear that you just won't be able to keep up with what's set out in front of you, whether it be a sprint, a ticket, or just a Kanban board that you've set up for yourself for your personal project. It is really just a big concern that a lot of us will have, but sometimes it gets a little exaggerated, or a little bit I guess, amplified, where we probably could do just fine keeping up with it, but we just have a really big anxiety about it, which is normal typically. And again, these all are going to sound very reasonable to anyone dealing with imposter syndrome. From the outside, it may not seem so, but when you are dealing with these kinds of feelings, it sounds perfectly reasonable. These sound all like good, actual reasoning, right? So for a second, I want you to imagine the perfect developer, okay? In your head, what would the perfect developer be? I mean, they probably can write tons of lines of code per day, right? They probably type incredibly fast. They probably know their programming language or framework like the back of their hand. They probably can also solve most problems in an instant. Well, the thing is, that developer does not and cannot exist. So it is incredibly important to accept that and try to remove that idea of that developer from your head. We all have that idea of that developer in our head, right? But imposter syndrome, in part, comes from wanting to be a perfect developer. But really, typically perfection is not achievable. It's just not something that any human being can achieve. So recognizing you're dealing with imposter syndrome is a really good first step to beating it. But so is accepting that you're never going to be perfect, and that's okay. So something that I see a lot being talked about is lines of code, that's LOC, per day or month. It doesn't matter. So, I mean, this can be argued really all day, every day by a bunch of different people. And this might be the most controversial part of my presentation. But really, at the end of the day, probably not, right? Typically, the consensus is that we're looking for quality, not quantity, okay? A good quote from Dr. Edgar Dijkstra, who was a computer science researcher and later on professor, was, "My point is today that if we wish to count lines of code, we should not regard them as lines produced, but as lines spent." We tend to try to shoot for lines written per day when doing work, but this probably is a metric that causes us just more anxiety, right? I really think that, and it is the general kind of consensus again, is that lines of code typically aren't what's important. It really should be the quality of your work. Some people argue that the less lines of code you write, the better. Sometimes even the more lines of code you can remove, the better. It's not really something I think that should be focused on all the time. It's really, are you meeting the objectives of your goals, your tickets, your sprint? That's ultimately what should matter, not the quantity of the amount of code you write. We get really hung up on, okay, I got this done, but it really doesn't look like I wrote a whole lot. And that's okay. So with that in mind, fighting imposter syndrome, it requires some sort of introspection and a shift in perspective surrounding your work. So then how do we actually go about overcoming it? So recognizing your feelings. This is really the first step in how you can actually kind of deal with it. Recognizing you are dealing with imposter syndrome really is the first and most important step, right? Just like you can't fix a bug without knowing it exists, you cannot deal with imposter syndrome if you aren't where you have it. And I mean, obviously that would make sense, right? If you're not really aware, you're even struggling with these kinds of feelings, you wouldn't really be able to know how to tackle them. So that's something that I really think is the most important step. For me, it was certainly. Again, like I said at the beginning, I went years without really realizing I was struggling with something like this. But once I did, it all kind of clicked, right? It was like, this makes sense. From there, I had a good idea of how I could actually deal with it. So really how I boil it down is, do you have feelings of inadequacy surrounding work? Or are you afraid of being revealed as a fraud, quote unquote, by those you know? You are most likely dealing with imposter syndrome. That's really the best way, I think, is how you can figure it out. And again, once you do realize you are dealing with it, it's almost like mind blown type moment. Like everything makes sense. You look back on everything you were dealing with, and it does really start to actually make you a lot more comfortable because now you actually know how to take action. So the second step I think is important is accept failure as a condition of success. It's okay to fail, and more importantly, it's good to fail. And again, that probably sounds very weird, right? We typically think failure is not a good thing. We have very negative associations with failure, and that's something we try to avoid. But failure, I think, is actually very important. Just like as children, we learn to walk rather by falling. We still learn by failing. It's how our skills are sharpened. You probably heard that the success is a staircase where it's just failing over and over again. You try something, you fail. You try something, you fail, and you do that enough until finally you succeed. And I do think that's true. Nobody who succeeds at anything will have succeeded without failing more times than they can count. So I think it's really good to learn to embrace failure. There are times, obviously, where failure is not acceptable. So I'm not saying that you should strive to fail, but when you do fail, learn to embrace it. Learning from it is definitely the most important thing you can do. Looking back on it probably won't help you very much. Regretting it won't help you very much, but learning from it definitely will. So learn to respect yourself, right? I mean, you right there, you are awesome. I mean, you have dedicated so much time to learning skills on your own and sharpening them. You spent tens of hundreds, maybe thousands of hours learning, creating, contributing to projects. So think about it this way. If anyone else you've seen spent hundreds of thousands of hours learning, creating, contributing, you'd applaud them, right? So then why are you so hard on yourself when you are doing the exact same thing? So you need to learn to respect yourself and your skills. You have earned the respect of yourself because you've worked hard. All of us as developers and designers have spent way more time than any of us probably fathom on honing our skills, learning new skills, practicing, sharing knowledge, talking with others. And really, it's commendable. And again, if we look at anyone else, think of a developer that you really like, okay? You probably commend them for all the work they put into a certain project, right? Well, you've pretty much done the same thing with your own projects. You probably even contributed some projects. You should be proud of yourself for that. It's something that we really need to try to reshape how we think about our work. We're very critical about ourselves because we tend to believe that's the best way to try to make ourselves better. But really, we need to kind of look at ourselves and realize we're probably just fine already. And like I said, it's good to fail, and it's good to try to learn from that. But we don't have to make ourselves fail. And when we don't respect ourselves and our skills and we talk down to ourselves, we're setting ourselves up for failure. So respecting yourself is integral, and you deserve your own respect. And I really do believe if you start respecting yourself, others will respect you as well. And others probably do already respect you. So another thing you can do is just talk it out, right? Or self-rubber duck debug. You ever talk a problem out loud that you had with your project and you found the answer, right? Just talk it out loud and you were like, there's the answer. So that's called rubber duck debugging. And so you can rubber duck debug yourself by talking it out with a friend, coworker, or family member. So really, just post your feelings online. Tell coworkers about your feel. Right now, you guys are coming from the web design Discord. That's a great place. I think we even still have an Imposter Syndrome channel in there. That's a good place to talk about how you're feeling. There are people there who are very sympathetic and probably have been dealing with what you have been dealing with. But really, just tell your coworkers how you feel too. And again, chances are they've related to it at some point, or just write it down. It's just good to get it out there. Kind of a bit of a corny kind of phrase here is package up your next release, not your feelings. But I do think it's important. Yep, it looks like Strager did just post the channel there. Imposter Syndrome venting. Make use of that. People commonly look into it, and it's a really good place just to talk about it. No judgment there. Identify coping mechanisms. And really, I know you've heard this before. You've probably heard this many times, but it does work, okay? So what calms you down? I mean, is it listening to music? Is it fidget? Maybe it's a game. Maybe it's a show you like watching. You need to identify a coping mechanism that helps you relax and just utilize the heck out of it. So for me, I really like music. That's why I got myself these headphones here, because I really do like music. It's something that, it's really good help to listen to while working because it does keep you focused. But even too, when I'm dealing with something, sometimes I like to pop on some music. I've got a cat and my bird that I like to hang out with. I like to go for walks sometimes. Sometimes even just looking out the window is very nice. I've got a window to my left right here. If whatever helps you, right? If it helps you, utilize it, okay? There's no shame in that. Really, it's about making yourself more comfortable and just make yourself feel better. And you should definitely utilize anything that helps you achieve that means. And then improving your environment, right? Just make sure you're comfortable where you work, whether it's at home or at the office. Me personally, I've done a very poor job of that. You can't see it, but my desk is so messy. You do not want to see it. I need to clean it. But so don't do what I do. Try to promote an environment that is healthy and good to work in, right? It'll help a lot. If you were able to at work, personalize your workspace with photos, quotes. Some people like to print out memes that are funny. Whatever makes you happy. If you need a fidget or a stress ball, make sure you have that. And make sure you always have access to water or your other favorite liquid. I could show mine on stream, but they're not sponsored by the drink I'm drinking, so I'm not going to do that. But just making sure you have something to sip on and drink and stay hydrated. That's another big thing that'll help. Which sounds strange to put in your environment, but it is. Your environment is what I call anything you can reach. You want that to be something that's good for work, okay? And I think we are about right on time here. 12 minutes. Yeah, okay. So we are all in this together, okay? We all share one common truth as developers and designers. We painfully work through problems, and it's frustrating, right? We all have to work hours trying to do just one thing, and we've all done it. We've all been there, right? Me personally, I've spent a combined 30 hours before just trying to get a dark theme, a nice dark theme that I wanted to work, and I just completely threw it away, and that sucked. It really did, but it's just part of the experience. But without failure, again, we could not learn and grow. And without frustration, we would never get that awesome feeling of accomplishment, which comes from solving a problem, completing a ticket or sprint, or finding that perfect layout. So, bear in mind that it's really easy to think that you're alone in how you feel, alone that I'm not going to be able to complete this project, that work is way too stressful right now, that I'm not as skilled as other people are, but chances are there are hundreds of thousands, probably millions of other developers out there who feel the exact same way you do. So I just always find it important to remember we're all in this together. And if you hang around the web dev Discord a lot, you'll find that this is especially true. Alrighty, well, that has been my talk, and it looks like we've got just about 10 minutes here as planned to go over questions. Actually, I'm not sure when I actually started, so we might have 10 to 15 minutes. But I'll have to go through the question logs here. Yeah.
You've got plenty of time. It's
perfect.
We're grateful if you can answer those questions.
Yeah, one sec. Let me get you guys back on my screen. Perfect. All righty.
So, my first question for you should be an easy one. Strager was asking, are you sure the perfect developer cannot exist? Have you heard of Strager?
Well, I think, obviously, I know it's in jest. Strager, I'm sure you're an awesome developer, and I was looking during your talk at your Lint.js, which I thought was awesome, but unfortunately, no, I still have to say there cannot be a perfect developer.
Couldn't give him that one.
All right. So another question is, you talked about quality, not quantity. What advice would you have for someone who still thinks that what if their quality stinks? Everyone's code is better than mine. Or even a vast majority of people's code is better than mine.
Well, I think something to keep in mind is one thing is very true, and I'm sure both of you can relate, and even you, Bebo, as mostly a designer, is that we all make heavy use of Stack Overflow, right? A lot. That's something that really happens. A lot of us think our code sucks, and the reality is, though, is that code does go over reiteration. I'm guilty of just copying and pasting code from Stack Overflow and suiting it to my needs, right? When we do think our code sucks, the reality is that nothing's going to work on the first try. I've done things where I've had to rewrite it probably, I don't even know how many times, probably 10 times before I'd be like, yeah, this is a good place for it to be. And again, I made heavy use of Stack Overflow for that. It's something I've shadowed senior devs before, and I've seen them literally just use Stack Overflow. If you're thinking that your code is still lacking in quality, it's something that you probably could, if you're working in your workplace, maybe kind of sit down with your whoever reviews your code, maybe your senior, and maybe have a reality check. Because sometimes maybe it's true, maybe your code is lacking quality, but maybe there will be advice on how to correct that. But other times, chances are you're probably doing just fine. And sitting down with someone who can look over your code and see how you're doing, which hopefully is being done on like a weekly or bi-weekly basis already, at least in a workplace setting, they'll probably be like, no, you're doing just fine. But if you're don't work in a professional setting and you're looking and you still think your code's kind of suffering, well, that's kind of why we have GitHub. The first place is to share code, right? And so other people can contribute to it. But it also is a great way for people to actually download and try what you're doing. It's something you can, we do have the web dev and web design Discord. We have channels in there specifically for sharing something and getting feedback. That's a great way that you can either confirm or you can confirm whether or not what you think is true is true. Because chances are, most of the times that I thought my code was suffering in quality, I was dead wrong and it was just fine.
Yeah, I have a couple of things to add to that as well, if you don't mind.
Absolutely.
Managing a team of developers, this kind of issue comes up fairly frequently. Generally, it's looking at past code as well that comes up. So looking at what you've done in the past, and just kind of cringing at what you wrote. I think that shows a sign of growth. And so if you are kind of consistently growing in that skill set, you'll look at stuff that you've done in the past and think that maybe that's applying to yourself today. But I think that that's just something that you can kind of tell yourself in the back of your head that, okay, well, clearly I'm improving because the stuff in my past is a little iffy. So I've improved in that area, and I'm likely to continue to improve.
Right.
Also, I think the other thing is just a complete mindset change. Everyone is, you've kind of alluded to it, everyone is kind of focused on this perfectionism, this ethereal wonderland of perfection, where somehow the code starts glowing from the screen and birds come around and pick you up, and like it just doesn't exist. And I think it's a mindset change where we need to remember that whatever language we're using, whatever tools we're using, that they're just that, they're tools. They're trying to accomplish a purpose. And if your code is accomplishing that purpose, then you're successful.
Right.
And there be improvements? Sure. Iterate on those things. But again, meet your needs, choose the tools that meet those needs, and get it done.
Yeah, absolutely.
Do you think there's a tactful way to help others identify imposter syndrome, or do you think it's a journey they kind of have to go through themselves?
Yeah, ultimately it's going to depend on the person, right? I think in general it is something the individual does have to discover on their own, at least have to work through on their own for the most part. Obviously, it is great to have external help, and that's something that is very important. Ultimately, I think there is probably a good way to point it out. Just that, not necessarily, you don't even have to mention it, really, that they're dealing with it, but really just reinforce that what they're saying about themselves or their work is not true. That, of course, is if that's the case. Because there's the other side is that you do not want to be, you don't want to be giving people compliments if it's really not going to help them grow. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But at the same time, if they're bashing themselves or their work and they're doing just fine and some of their stuff is awesome, you need to catch them on that and be like, no, you're doing just fine. I think ultimately, just from that, I think it does help people really start to look at themselves and reframe how they view their work. Because I think really it's easy to post something on like Reddit or on a Discord server, and it just gets lost with all these other projects sometimes. And I think sometimes that does contribute to a sense of lack of self-worth when it comes to projects, things like that. So really just try to be there for people and give feedback where you can really does help.
Absolutely. I think the thing you hit on is start doing that if you notice them making those remarks. It's not our place to kind of say, hey, you might be going through imposter syndrome specifically,
right.
and saying, oh, actually,
right.
I think you're beating yourself up. When someone they could be perfectly
right.
fine with where they're coming from.
Yeah, ultimately, our job as acquaintances and friends is not really to be a therapist all the time, but just to be there as a friend or acquaintance.
Good advice. Good advice. Well, Devin, thank you again for taking us through that.
Absolutely.
A lot of people related to that, especially in identifying it in themselves and knowing when it is that we're comparing ourselves too heavily to other people. You're on Twitter, so your account's new, but everyone, if you do want to follow Devin, that's where they are, twitter.com/developerrowan. Do follow them if you want to hear more about this. The recording is going to go on YouTube on the same link you're watching right now. Thank you so much. We've just been so blown away by all the talks we've been watching here. We didn't know what to expect when we put out the call for speakers from the community. They could, because we were inviting first-time speakers, but everyone, including yourself, has just done such a great job and really hit the nail on the type of theme we wanted to hear.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, this was my first time ever doing some kind of speaking engagement, but I hope soon to get my personal site up and running. I have a lot of plans in the works, so if you want to keep an eye on my Twitter, that'd be awesome. I have hopefully some more great tips I can share in the future.
Absolutely.
But thank you again for having me.
Yeah, it didn't feel like it was your first time. That was solid. That went better than my first time ever speaking. So and that was live as well.
I do sales for my job, so maybe that's where that came from.
Okay, wonderful. And this time you're just selling developer positivity.
There you go. Yeah.
Unlimited loads. All right.
Ron, before we go, I just wanted to plug again just the future that we have some more awesome speakers coming up next week on 100%. December 13th, then the following week on December 20th, and then on the following week after that on December 27th. And so check out redditweb.dev and see our full schedule and the talks that Yes, like, oh, nope.
So depending on mobile,
There.
desktop, whether they've got expanded full screen, whatever, it's somewhere.
There. Yeah.
Absolutely. All right. Thank you all for joining us for session 3. We'll be back next week with ingenious ways to work smarter, faster, and healthier. Thank you.